Security in conjunction with the Attorney General's Office and FDLE. The state of Florida has charged and is in the process of arresting 20 individuals across the state for voter fraud. Now, the majority of these people illegally voted in Palm Beach, Broward, and Miami-Dade, although there are others in other parts of the state. These folks voted illegally in this case, and there's going to be other grounds for other prosecutions in the future. They are disqualified from voting because they've been convicted of either murder or sexual assault, and they do not have the right to vote. They have been disenfranchised under Florida law, and Amendment 4 that passed specifically included people that have been convicted of sexual assault and homicide from being able to have an automatic restoration of their voting rights. And so they did not go through any process. They did not get their rights restored, and yet they went ahead and voted anyways. That is against the law, and now they're going to pay the price for it. So they will be charged. They are being charged and arrested today with election fraud. This is a third-degree felony in the state of Florida. They could face a $5,000 fine and up to 5 years in prison for illegally voting in our elections. I also want to be very clear going forward that we're going to continue to make sure that our laws are rigorously enforced. And one of the things that we are doing is we want to ensure that all the records that we have from the most recent election in 2020 are preserved, and that additional actions that are taken will be able to do it. And so we do have ongoing reviews at the state level, and so we are putting out notice that all 67 supervisors of election through Cord Bird and Pete Antonacci are going to be informing all the supervisors that they need to make sure to preserve all the documentation until all these investigations are complete. We want to make sure that when you start some prosecutions, you need to do and focus on anyone that violated the law. We don't want to be selective about it. So everyone will be on notice. They're going to send formal notification on that very soon. But I think you see, to have somebody who's clearly an illegal felon voting, and yet they did it and nothing happened. We stepped in with this until we said this is something that we take seriously. Now, this is only one class of voters that we know have violated the law. There are investigations ongoing into people that have voted in 2 different jurisdictions, and I imagine you are going to see prosecutions on that. We also have folks who are voting who are illegal aliens that are not citizens of the United States, and as we know in Florida's Constitution, the only people eligible to vote are U.S. citizens. And we think it's very important that we do that. And then you also have other types of fraudulent activity that where people can be brought to justice. Now, going forward, we have our primary coming up on Tuesday, and then obviously we'll have a general election this November. All the things that we've legislated, that is live, and those are real protections for voter integrity. But that means no ballot harvesting in the state of Florida. That is going to be a top priority of this office to make sure that it's one person, one vote, not have some political operative dump a satchel of votes, somewhere, in the middle of town although those boxes are not allowed anymore in the middle of town. But that's not the way you conduct an election. I mean, this is a solemn thing to go in there. I voted in the primary up in Tallahassee. You go in, you have a divider, you make it, it's secret, you put it in the box. And that's the way it should be. When you start getting away from that and you have a whole bunch of people involved in handling these ballots, that is not the way you conduct elections. And so Florida's been very clear that is not allowed here in the state of Florida, and we will make sure that people are held accountable if they decide to go down those roads. So this is something where we sprung into action very quickly. We got the money July 1st, already have hired people, already going to work, and I think it shows that this is something that we take very seriously as a state. So I want to thank everybody that's been involved, and we'll hear from some of the folks right now. So I'd like to introduce our Attorney General, Ashley Moody.
Well, we appreciate those of you that have joined us today for this announcement. And I know what I'm hearing is excitement that the state of Florida is officially recognizing today by these actions that we will enforce the law and that we do take election security very seriously. I can tell you as a former federal prosecutor and judge, anytime you announce a criminal action, it is a solemn thing. It is a serious thing. And so we want to recognize today that in order for a democracy to persevere, in order for us to remain a country and a state under a rule of law, we must have men and women that are willing to enforce those laws. And today is a recognition of that. We are so proud of Pete Antonacci and his team that came in to office and quickly got to work. Now, through this new legislation, our office has the ability to work with them, and we have been partners in this effort, and I appreciate your work. We must have elected leaders that are ensuring free and fair elections and also assuring our public and the citizens that they can have confidence in the election process. I think it's heartbreaking to all of us, including the governor and others that are standing up here, that according to some polls, as little as 1 in 5 Americans are very confident in the election process, and that skepticism spans party lines, and we cannot accept that. Not as citizens of this great state, not as leaders. And so we must take action, not only to ensure there is a fair and free election in this state, but to ensure that the public understands that we are working towards that every day and that they can have every confidence that our elections in Florida will be secure. And we take that job very seriously. And that is why this governor, our very detail-oriented governor, has taken bold steps and worked to ensure the passage of this legislation of the Office of Election Crimes and Security. And that's why both through work with our former Secretary of State Laura Lee and our current Secretary of State Cord Byrd, they are working every day to ensure that those that are prohibited from voting do not vote, and if they do, they are held accountable. So today we are announcing actions against 20 defendants in 5 different circuits across the state of Florida, and I am sure that this will allay fears that behind the scenes, within state government, people are ignoring violations of law. That is not the case. And I can tell you from my previous experience and working alongside these great men and women, when you have a specialized unit, when you can ensure that you can attract and retain people that have been trained and are skilled in a particular area of law, you will be able to respond more rapidly and efficiently and effectively when you do have violations of law. So this legislation was much needed. We thank our legislative leaders. We thank the governor for proposing this and working with our other state leaders. A government cannot stand without the trust and confidence of the people it represents. So today is a very important step, as in Florida, we work diligently to ensure free and fair elections and the confidence of our citizens they are free and fair election. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. First, I'd like to begin by thanking Governor DeSantis for his steadfast commitment to protecting our elections. Time and again, Governor DeSantis has fortified elections integrity by investing in our elections infrastructure and enacting laws that protect voters and their votes. Equal to our responsibility to administer open and honest elections is our duty to protect the sanctity of the vote. Prosecution of voter fraud discourages violations of law and gives voters greater confidence in the elections process. We applaud Governor DeSantis for his appointment of Pete Antonacci as Director of the Office of Elections and Crimes and Integrity. Pete has come in and doggedly investigated these crimes in a very short period of time and just done a fantastic job, and we're proud of the progress he and his team have made in this short amount of time. The stakes for rooting out election fraud and malfeasance are extremely high, as even minor corruption in the elections process threatens the constitutional right to representative government. There's been plenty of doubt and skepticism from critics about the necessity of a specialized unit to investigate elective fraud. But as the Supreme Court in 2008 in a voter ID case noted, while the most effective method of preventing election fraud may well be debatable, the propriety of doing so is perfectly clear. Today, the necessity and propriety of the Office of Election Crimes and Security is on full display. These arrests send a clear message to those who are actively engaging in election crimes or irregularities that our team of highly skilled investigators will undertake a thorough examination, and if evidence is found of a crime, you will be held accountable. I also want to give credit to our partners in law enforcement, without whom we could not do this important work. The FDLE, the statewide prosecutor's office, and of course the Attorney General have been indispensable during this investigation. We will continue to work with our law enforcement partners at every level to ensure that we are able to face evolving threats to our election system. I want to again thank Governor DeSantis for his leadership and commitment to elections integrity and for holding this press conference to bring attention to the great work this office is doing to safeguard our elections. The Department of State works hard every day to uphold the law and to ensure that Floridians continue to lead the nation in elections integrity. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Governor, for your leadership, and thank you, Attorney General Moody. This is a special day for those of you who observed elections over the years, because this is the day that we begin taking fraud seriously. And you begin taking fraud seriously by assigning consequence to bad acts. It's been well known in the political science community for a long time that we have had a problem with ineligible voters casting ballots in elections in this state, and nothing has been done about it until now. And you may think that 20 voters is not a lot, but you're in Broward County, and you know that you just elected a person to Congress here this year by 5 votes. And I'm certain that in that tranche of voters, there are plenty of illegal ballots cast. And it is just awfully unfair to the supporters of political candidates, to the candidates, and to the public at large that this sort of thing has been allowed to go on. So this is the first of it. You'll see more of these actions, and you'll see more of these actions until the people who are behind it quit promoting it, and the people that want to take risks know that there is a downside risk to voting when you're not eligible to vote. So thank you very much, Governor.
Thanks so much. All right, Mark Glass.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Governor, General Moody. I'm FDLE Acting Commissioner Mark Glass. Elections are the cornerstone of our democracy. It is critical to ensure only those who are legally eligible to vote actually do so. Over the last month, FDLE agents and analysts in our Office of Executive Investigations have been investigating dozens of allegations of voter fraud sent to us from the Department of State. These arrests represent either a sex offender or a convicted murderer who illegally voted in the 2020 election. They did not just attempt to vote, they actually voted. With arrest warrants in hand, early this morning, FDLE agents from the Executive Investigations, Miami, Orlando, and the Tampa Bay region began arresting these suspects who committed these election crimes. But today is not about these violent criminals. Today is about our honest, hardworking, and law-abiding Floridians. And our message to you is simple. In Florida, your vote counts. To that end, we will do everything in our power to ensure that those who cannot legally vote never cast a ballot. One of the most important ways we can ensure election integrity is to investigate and arrest those who violate our election laws. Thank you to our FDLE agents and analysts working in conjunction with the Department of State Office of Election Crimes and Security, Attorney General's Office of Statewide Prosecution. I know each of you have been working diligently on these cases and will continue your efforts to ensure the security of Florida's election. Your work sends a strong message just days before a primary election. In Florida, when we say we have reliable and accurate elections, we mean it. I want to thank Governor DeSantis for his commitment to making sure Florida is a national leader when it comes to having secure elections. Let me conclude by saying that we will continue working with the Office of Election Crimes and Security and the Office of Statewide Prosecution to hold those who commit these crimes accountable. There will be more arrests to come. And anyone out there who is thinking about engaging in illegal ballot harvesting or other election crimes, don't do it, because we're coming at you. We are going to identify and investigate these crimes and work closely with those who are prosecuting them. And I want to say, don't do it. Please don't do it, because we're coming.
Well, we really appreciate all the work that went in. And again, this is just the first step. There's many more in the pipeline. and hopefully not too many more because we don't find as many, but we're not just going to turn a blind eye to this. The days of that happening in Florida are over. And I understand there's different prosecutors. Some of them, it's not that they're necessarily ignoring, it's just their specialties are some of the other more traditional crimes. I get that. I do think there's probably some prosecutors that have been loath to take these cases. Well, now we have the ability with the Attorney General and the statewide prosecutor to bring those on behalf of the state of Florida, because you have a vote here for some of these elections that affects people in other counties depending on the election and the race. And so it's really a major interest for the state as a whole that we do it and we do it right. And so again, there'll be, I think unfortunately, there'll be more prosecutions for some of the illegal felons. There are going to be prosecutions for people that voted in 2 different states. And look, we're a state that we've seen a lot of people move here over the years. That's understandable. And not everyone will take themselves off the old state's voting roll. That in of itself is not going to trigger. What's going to trigger if you actually vote in both places in a primary or in a general election. We have the ability to match those records through the ERIC system for most states now. So it's just not worth doing to send in. And, you know, some of these states will send out ballots to people that haven't even lived there for 5 or 10 years. You know, there are people that hadn't lived in California for 10 years, and they're getting these ballots in these other states. And so if other states are sending you ballots, just understand, if you're a Florida voter, you know, you can choose to vote in a different state and be a resident there. You can choose to vote here and be a resident, but you can't do both. So that's going to end up coming, and there is going to be people who are foreign nationals. We don't think a lot, but there are definitely some. We want the federal government to be working constructively with us on these investigations. And I would say so far that has not really been the case. I think that their interests lie elsewhere. But clearly, we have not only an interest, but an obligation, given the state's constitution, to ensure that the elections are conducted with U.S. citizens only. And so we're going to be looking for that as well. So and of course, the ballot harvesting is something that has gotten totally out of control around this country, and it undermines the confidence that people have in these elections. And so we are not going to countenance that in any way, shape, or form. Yes, sir.
You mentioned these individuals that we charged for trying to commit in 2020. Do you report anything that's happening now that we're early voting?
Do you guys have? You want to take that?
Sure. Thank you, Governor. We're going to be very watchful of the people who vote, and we're going to be comparing the people who vote in this primary to the people who are ineligible. So we're going to keep up with this election coming up, and we'll keep up with the general election as well.
Governor, are you taking any?
Governor, you stated that there were illegal aliens and people voting in other jurisdictions. Do you have mugshots, do you have names?
So those are part of the investigations that they're pursuing right now. I am pretty confident you'll see prosecutions, not necessarily tomorrow, but in the relatively near future of the double voting. But you got to have all the cases, they've got to be buttoned up. I mean, they're not going to bring a case without having it be airtight. And I think the same thing with the people who are foreign nationals. I think it would be a lot easier for us to build those cases if we had cooperation from the Department of Homeland Security or USCIS. Nevertheless, this is something new. But we're mindful of, we can't just say you voted and you're illegal alien. Like, you got to prove that in court. And so they're working to make sure that those cases are built.
Governor, are you or Secretary Byrd taking any specific action in relation to Broward Supervisor?
So it's funny, I was coming in and people said the media is reporting that you're yanking the supervisor. That was not the reason for this. This is something we've been working on since July 1st. Now, obviously, all these constitutional officers, have certain duties under the law, and they should just all be mindful of that. But there's nothing specific that we came, in terms of the Broward for. But I think we've shown that, if there's a basis to act, if laws are being ignored or people are breaching duties, then under the Florida Constitution, the check is put in the governor and the Florida Senate. And so that's what we did with the state attorney on the other side of the state. And we've done that obviously down here in the past as well with the sheriff and with some other folks. And so we'll continue to do that. Yes, sir.
Governor, the fact that there are only 20 arrests in 2020 out of millions of ballots that were cast in 2020.
Yeah, but that's not the upper limit, though.
Election was pretty well run in this state, and that I guess my question is all of this necessary for 20 arrests?
So it's not just going to be 20 arrests. This is the opening salvo of an office that was just set up on July 1st. So before I proposed this, and this was my idea, before I proposed this, well, because people weren't getting prosecuted. But before we proposed this, there were just examples of this stuff seeming to fall through the cracks. So this is the opening salvo. This is not the sum total of 2020. Now, I do think we did do a good job. And I've said that the morning after the election. I said, you know, everyone knows the results in Florida. No one knows the results in about a dozen states. And we're all waiting, and there's ballot dumps and all this stuff. That's not the way to conduct an election. So we did do a good job. But the way I was raised and the way I've always been is, you know, you don't just sit back and kick your feet up and rest on your laurels. Did we do 100%? You never reach perfection, but we're going to try to get there. So we knew we had more work to do. We also learned a lot about watching some of the things that happen in some of the other states, and we don't want to see that here in the state of Florida. So this is the first step. There will be more that happen over the weeks and months, and hopefully there's not a lot of cases that need to be prosecuted for 2022. But now we have the infrastructure in place where if there is the fraud, you know, you can be bet that there's going to be investigations, and if you're guilty, there's going to be prosecutions. Yes, sir.
Yes, Governor DeSantis, my household received multiple mail-in ballots that we did not request.
Did you request one last cycle?
We did not request one last cycle or this cycle. My wife has never requested a mail-in ballot. She got two.
Can you talk?
And also I've reported on my site, freeflorida.me, multiple other Broward residents, some of them in this very room, that have had the same thing happen to them.
Well, if you can give that information to Cord, that's something we're concerned about. I mean, basically, Florida law had been you can request one and you can click to say keep sending them to me. So people that requested for 2020 will still get a ballot for 2022. We reset that for the next election cycle. So starting 2024, there'll be no mail ballots sent out legacy. It'll only be specific requests. I wanted that to apply to this cycle, but the legislature wouldn't go along with that. So nevertheless, so there are people that requested mail because of COVID or whatever last time who will still get it. And that's just what was Florida law. If you have never requested a mail ballot, give the information to Cord because we definitely do not think that that's appropriate. Because to ensure the integrity of it, there has to have been some agency to ask for that ballot at some point. And if there's never been that, then these things should just float around in the ether. And we do get reports, and, you know, we follow these up. You know, we don't necessarily have substantiated all this, but we get reports about chasing some of these errant absentee ballots and how people will do that. And that's illegal to be doing that. So we do not want to see that. Yes, sir. Well, we put out something on the social media. You know, when I heard the news and the status was kind of in the balance, you know, Casey and I were praying, and we hope for the best. But obviously, you know, it's a devastating loss. You know, we are looking forward to hopefully being able to get down and pay our respects when they do the remembrance ceremony.
Governor, I'm wondering, are you auditing any particular election? I know, Mr. Antonucci, you alluded to Florida's 20th congressional election that was won by 5 votes. So are you looking at one particular, you know, election?
It's statewide. Yeah, it's statewide. I mean, any examples, you know, we are going to pursue. We think it's important to make sure that this is done across the board. And now, you know, when you have a close election, and I actually had forgotten about how close that was, it just shows you why this is important. You know, most elections are going to be outside the margin where some of this stuff is going to matter. But you have one or two that aren't, and all of a sudden, the people's will could be thwarted because of voter fraud or irregularities or illegal ballots being cast. And so it's something that's very important. But we view it as something that you got to look at statewide. It's not just focusing in one part of the state or the other. So if there's examples of things going on, you know, in North Florida, Southwest Florida, in addition to Southeast Florida, obviously the office is going to be very important. Michael.
Yeah, hi, Governor. Governor, as you well know, a couple of years ago, voters of the state approved an amendment that said that people who have served time for felony, who have made restitution, that they should be welcomed back into civic life, into being voters again. Do you have any problem with that?
So the voters spoke, and we've implemented that. But these people who were following up, are outside the contours of Amendment 4. The Amendment 4, and Amendment 4 would not have passed if they were automatically re-enfranchising sex offenders and murderers. The public wouldn't have supported that. They wanted it for crimes, although the reason why I oppose that as a voter, because they're still serious criminals who are getting automatically re-enfranchised. And I thought that, you should show some individualized improvement in your life. Nevertheless, the voters have spoken, so that's the law in the state of Florida constitutionally. And we've actually implemented procedures with the Clemency Board to be able to restore. So if someone is restored by Amendment 4, we've done it so we can fast track the other rights, because they only cared about the voting. They didn't restore the jury, serving on the jury, or some of these other rights. And so we viewed it as kind of the same kit and caboodle. So when you have these votes and these amendments, you take a position or not, and that's your right. But once it's passed, we obviously implement that. So you're not going to see us bringing a prosecution on somebody that has been convicted of a different felony than these if they're covered by Amendment 4. It would not be appropriate, and we will not do that. So, okay, everybody, thanks so much. We'll see you soon.